It's the highest watched trailer non-franchise streaming. So like, and there's like 1,000 like things that you have to go through. And I think that's kind of like the same. It's like it shadowed box offices of a non-franchise Amazon, MGM, first like kind of thing. But
that's still good.
Yeah, no,
it's still really good.
I mean, it's incredible. Exciting. Wow, 140.9.
Yeah.
Damn.
Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. From behind the scenes to building the scenes. This week on Sips and Clips, we sit down with Len Ciccotello, a New Jersey native who got his start at the legendary agency Lost Planet, working alongside Hank Corwin. Len spent years building his craft in the world of behind-the-scenes and EPK filmmaking before making the jump to scripted editorial. We break down what BTS and EPK work involves, how that world has evolved with the rise of streaming, and what it really takes to transition into scripted when nobody's handing you a roadmap. We also get into the skills that transfer seamlessly, the ones that require a relearn, and how a single play in New York changed the entire trajectory of Len's life. Welcome to this episode of Sips and Clips. My name is Leanne McFalls.
I'm Michael Schusterman.
And today we have a very important guest. I'm switching it up because last time I realized
you say special
I
all
said
the time?
Special way too much. And it's like, who's really special? I mean, when you say everybody's special, then like I got to every now
when
and then.
When everyone's super, nobody's
super. Exactly. So I need to be like coming up with different names. I'm going to open up a thesaurus of like different words for special and use it every single time. But we do have a very special, important, great guest here today. But I'm going to let him say his name because I am totally going to butcher your last name.
Let's hear it.
Len.
Is it not Ciccotello?
Ciccotello?
No.
Ciccotello.
Ciccotello.
Oh,
You got it?
Ciccotello.
Does anybody call you Len Chick?
I got that sometimes in high school.
Chickitello?
Yeah.
Chick.
But my brother's nickname was Chick through most of high school.
Okay.
Chick. That's a good one.
Yeah.
So we've got Len Ciccotello here. He is, how would you describe yourself?
Oh, boy.
Who are you?
Who
am
is
I?
Len?
At this stage, I'm an assistant editor in scripted television and features. Before that, I was an editor in the behind-the-scenes featurette world. Before that, I was a commercial assistant. I've had a few evolutions.
You've got a illustrious career.
There you go.
We are going to talk to Len about his behind-the-scenes career because we've been dying to get a behind-the-scenes person on the show. It's come up a few times in different episodes, so we wanted to talk to a real pro in this field. But first, we have to start with what we're sipping on. So I will let Len start because he's our guest. What are you sipping on today, Len?
Oh, just black coffee. I have one cupful and a second cup sitting next to it, prepared to go.
I always see your Instagram posts that are just about coffee, about just needing coffee.
I'm coffee obsessed. I like coffee.
How many coffees do you have a day?
This will probably be kind of my limit with the two. This is a larger one, and then I've got just a 16-ounce sitting next to that. That's plenty of coffee. Otherwise, my heart starts telling me, you're going to need to run a mile now.
Palpitations.
Yeah.
What about you, Michael?
Almond latte. What can I say?
From your house or?
No, from Starbucks.
Oh.
I woke up pretty hungover, so I had to go straight to Starbucks just because I had no time.
What are you doing on Partying and Raging?
Line dancing at Eastwood in Koreatown.
I love line dancing.
Oh, and now she's interested.
Growing up as a theater kid, I just loved choreographed dancing.
Kickball change. What are you sipping on, Leanne?
I am also sipping on coffee, but this is just made from the house, Dunkin' Donuts coffee.
Dunkin'.
And I discovered, not that I discovered, but I was trying to be good and just put like milk in as creamer, but I love flavors. So I got caramel vanilla Kroger creamer. So I'm drinking it.
Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah, Kroger's caramel vanilla creamer. It's delicious in my fluent in movie quotes and sarcasm mug. So
10 out of 10.
Len, I know that you started to tell us about your illustrious career, but why don't you start with just where you're from and kind of how you got interested in going down this path?
I'm from New Jersey, southern Jersey. I kind of grew up in the Cherry Hill area.
Cherry Hill. Yeah.
Yeah. We share the East Coast vibes.
We do.
I did not intend to go to school for film. I was always interested in movies. I was always watching movies. I mean, I had 3 jobs growing up as a kid. I worked in a comic book shop, a video store, and I worked in a movie theater, and that was it. I would just cycle between those 3 jobs. So I always liked movies. I spent a lot of time watching movies, but I didn't know that that was a career path, especially coming from Jersey. You know, it just wasn't something that you immediately thought, oh yeah, I could do that. So I thought I was going to be a writer, and I really enjoyed writing, creative writing. I did a lot of that when I was in high school. I applied to one school and I got into that school, which was Glassboro State, which is now known as Rowan University. And at my orientation, I went through the literature program orientation, and my mom was with me, and she said, hey, I was walking around and there's a orientation happening for a film program here. Did you know they had film? And I had no idea. She's like, well, why don't we just go sit and listen? And we went and we sat, and I was like, well, this is cool. I had no idea that they even had a school for this. So I went up to the professor that gave the orientation and I asked, I'm like, what would it take if I was to try to get into this program? And he's like, well, you're going to need to do your generals anyway. So go do that and see me at the end of your the first year, and we'll figure it out. We'll get a path for you. I was like, okay. So I did that and met up with him, and he got me into the program. And I was really kind of like, this is cool. I like this. It was a blast. I had a lot of fun doing that, but I hadn't picked a track. I thought writing, because I still liked writing. I was like, well, maybe screenplays will be something that I did. But it wasn't like I need to do this. And in my junior year, a professor came in that had actually been a working professional. And he had worked in editorial, and he'd worked for Troma Films. He was an editor on Toxic Avenger 2. Okay. And he had worked for Hank Corwin as an assistant.
Really?
And as an assistant in his commercial shop, Lost Planet in New York. And we just got along. Like, he had a bunch of weird Hammer horror films and different Italian horror films that he liked, and I liked that kind of stuff. And we just kind of bonded. His name was Dean Johnson, and I credit Dean for everything that's happened in my entire career because he put me on the path. He's just like, I think you would dig editing. Like, let me teach you editing. I completely got hooked. And when I graduated, he said to me, look, I got an opportunity here. I don't know if this is something you're interested in, but remember that guy, Hank Corwin, I told you about? I still have friends over there that work there. And if you're interested in an internship, I can see if they'll take you. And I was obsessed. I just wanted that job. I just wanted to work, and this was this was 95. And this was a time when schools didn't have Avids, right? Like, they only had, chems. But the world of editorial was changing to Avid. And so to find work, which I very quickly found out coming out of school, especially looking in New York, everybody asked if you knew Avid. And I was like, I don't have access to this. These are, $120,000 systems back then? They weren't just software only that you could plug into your laptop and, play around on.
They were hacked Apple IIs, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. Apple ones.
Hackintosh.
Yeah.
It was like, they were giant. And Dean managed to convince the executive producer there to interview me, at least for the intern. So we met. She introduced me a couple editors, and then she was like, all right, let me think on this. I'll talk to Hank. We'll get back to you. But they get back to me and gave me the shot. And I was like, this is going to be cool. And so I was living in Jersey and, in Mount Laurel, taking a bus at this point
into the city,
into New York every day.
Wow.
And they thought I was going to show up like 2 days a week. And I just was like, can I be here 5 days? And they're like, yeah, but do you want to? Yes, I want to be here. So I just would buy like a monthly commuter pass and just show up. And then they would just tell me to do stuff. We need the bathroom cleaned. Okay. We need the tape room reorganized. Okay. We need our FileMaker system restructured so that we can get all of these elements that are piled everywhere out of here. Okay. You just did it.
And can you just really quickly run through me, what does that day, more time-wise?
Yeah.
I've heard this story and I'm still shocked at how long your days were. So what did that look like? You're waking up at?
I would get up at 5:30. 5:15, I'd get up and I'd get on the bus around 6 and then take that into the city. It was an hour and a half with traffic to get into the city. I'd get to the office right around 8 o'clock. And I'd be there before most people were. They give me keys just to kind of set the place up. So I'd come in, turn everybody's lights on, turn the Avids on, that kind of thing. And then I was there until everyone would leave for the night. because it was always an opportunity to learn. There was always someone that would teach me something, and I just was a sponge at that point. And the last bus out of the city would leave at 10 o'clock. So if I wasn't on that bus, I was sleeping on the couch in Hank's office, which I did a lot.
But then that's another hour and a
half from the time I leave.
From the time you leave. So now I understand where this coffee obsession comes from.
There was a lot of coffee. Oh, back then there was a lot more coffee than just this.
My God.
Yeah. And it was incredible. I learned so much.
Yeah.
You know, after about 6 months, and you'll find this funny, Hank pulls me aside and says, listen, I'm starting to feel bad about this. You've been commuting every day for 6 months, and like, we're not paying you anything. It's like, I think I have to give you a job now. Like, I just feel guilty about this. So he offers me his office manager position or something just to keep me. Like, they just want, which was great. And I just I was so grateful. I'm like, yes, I'll be an assistant eventually. When they find a space for me, I'll figure that out. But this was great. And then he's like, and we're going to reimburse your travel costs. And I was like, dude, like, that's really sweet. You didn't have to do that. And he was very good to me. I was with him for 6 years in New York. And then he's the one that moved me to LA. There was a partner in the LA office, and the two of them were sort of going their separate ways.
How funny.
And he just wanted another stable body in LA. And he said to me, look, he's like, I can't make any promises, but if you come with me and you'll come to LA, we'll move you there and we'll set you up. And if I get another feature, like I'll do my best to bring you on as an apprentice, or I'll try to start you cutting commercials. And I was like, yeah.
So you move out to LA, and then did you get involved in BTS right away?
No. Okay. I spent a year trying to figure out my path kind of at Lost Planet. And what I was coming to the conclusion of is what I didn't really love working in commercials. I had gotten a little taste of something working in New York. Hank had a friend of his that was sort of the head of the Sundance Channel. And this guy was a really nice guy, and he was looking for Hank or someone in Hank's office to cut some shorts for an actor who wanted to direct. And he was just like, could someone here do that? And Hank didn't have the time to do it because he had too much going on. And he's just like, well, Lenny, you want to cut? And I said, yeah, who's the person? Is Casey Affleck. And Casey had directed a series of shorts with a bunch of his friends. It's like Reese Witherspoon and Don Cheadle. And they were great. The feature world wasn't really materializing at that point for Hank because he, having now separated from this partner, kind of was the anchor of that shop for a while. So he needed to train up some new editors that he had just kind of brought on. So those guys were getting kind of trained up in commercials. And then I just was like, I want to cut. I got to figure out a way around this. And my wife at the time was also working in production and post, and she worked for a guy named Eric Matthews. And Eric had produced the behind the scenes stuff for the first Matrix movie. And she had been working with Eric, and Eric said to her, just kind of off the cuff, and we just landed Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movie, and we're going to be doing a bunch of behind the scenes on that. We're looking for an editor that's going to work cheap and kind of knows comics. And she kind of put her hand up and said, my husband is both of those things. Will work cheap and knows comics. And she called me immediately and told me about this. She's like, I need you to put a reel together and, send it over to these guys. So I put this reel together, and it was like a bunch of the small commercials that I had cut. I hadn't cut a ton of stuff at Lost Planet. And I threw a couple of the Casey Affleck shorts on there. I'm like, okay, these are narrative, at least shows that I can do narrative. And I got a call from Josh Orrick, and he said, look, I didn't respond to any of your commercial work, but those Casey Affleck shorts really, I like them. I like them.
Wow, yeah.
And if you're interested in this, can we talk about Spider-Man a little bit? And I'm like, yeah, let's talk. And then he offered me the money, which was double what I was making at Lost Planet as an assistant. And I'm like, oh yeah, I can work for that.
Yeah.
And then he's just like, and I need you to be able to work from like home, basically. And do you know Final Cut Pro? And I'm like, no, but I'm going to learn it. So that is how I got into doing behind the scenes. And we cut 22 behind the scenes featurettes for that movie. And then Sam Raimi promptly killed all but 4 of them.
Oh my God.
We spent like 8 months just working on that stuff just to have most of it killed. And that was my first taste of, so in commercials, most of the stuff gets finished. This was new. I was just like, and I remember having a conversation with my mother at the time, and I was like kind of ranting like a 20-something-year-old would do, like about this whole thing, like what the hell kind of. And she's just like, Len, did you get paid? And I was like, yeah. So you paid your rent for 6-8 months and put food on the table. And I'm like, yeah. She's like, shut up. Okay, Mom, thanks for bringing me down to earth.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So that was my first
Foray into it.
Yeah, foray into it. And then from there, I worked on a couple of things with Eric. Like, it was kind of like trying these different things, seeing how we worked together. And I kind of liked it because this was the early days of DVD sort of special features, right? So where you could get away with ridiculous stuff. Like, the studios didn't quite have a sense of what they had there yet. The marketing department was like, it was an adjunct of the marketing department. They kind of had a division between the two. And they had the guys that sort of focused on those DVD extras, and then people that worked on, marketing the film. And so that department kind of ran in a way that they could let you kind of experiment with stuff and try things. And they didn't know what this was going to be. So they just, you would get a box of tapes and be like, what can you make of this? Ooh, all right, hold on. Let's try to figure this out. So you'd watch everything down and you'd start from there. And that was kind of fun.
So you're not involved at all then in the shooting process and the gathering interviews. They're just giving you what they shoot. Is that right?
Okay, so there's two ways to go about this. And I've done both. Sometimes you're hired by the studio with the express intention that they're going to send a producer to set, and that it might be a producer that you're working with. So say I go and work for, I'm going to use Mob Scene because that's a company I worked with a lot. They go to a producer at Mob Scene and say, we'll use Project Hail Mary. We want you to be on Project Hail Mary. We're going to give you 22 days on set to cover to get interviews and B-roll.
Okay.
And as the editor that works for that company, then they'll say, Len, we want you to work on this with your producer. Okay. And then the producer starts, sometimes they'll have a conversation with you. Sometimes they'll write a pitch for stuff for the studio. And it'll be a little bit of a back and forth. And you'll find, sort of the middle ground of how much participation I get to have in the process at the beginning. The other way to do this, and I had a company for a while. I worked with a terrific guy by the name of Alan Griswold. Alan and I partnered up, and we worked on a bunch of Ben Stiller movies and some catalog titles at the time. For us, that meant I was heavily involved in the proposal writing phase, setting up the questions for the interviews, sometimes being on set or being present for the interviews, and then gathering the materials, having hired a camera crew to gather the materials, and then building from there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, there's different ways.
Different ways. It sounds like that you've worked with the company, like you just said, and then also you could also freelance as well.
Yeah.
So it can go either way.
And yeah, that's another way to do it. So I've also been hired as, kind of a hired gun. You show up, they give you a box of tapes and they're like, we don't know what's on this. Mm-hmm. Good luck.
Just make
that. And you'd go, that was kind of how the early 2000s was. Like, a lot of times I would get hired on something, they would give me a box of tapes and say, what can we do with this? And I did a bunch of freelance work that way, where I was writing the story based on what I could find in the interviews. And I'm like, okay, we can do a piece on this particular sequence because we have a lot of material from that. We can do a piece on the composer because they, for some reason, shot 10 days of them in the studio recording. So we would come up with stuff kind of more on the fly. These days, it's a lot more pitch. Like, you pitch in advance of what you'd like to do. A
lot more specific.
Yeah, you try to, because then you shoot for that. You intentionally try to steer your days in that direction.
We read the script and this scene is really going to be amazing. Let's do a thing about how the VFX worked in this scene or something like that.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you're, in these instances, if you're watching the movie or if you're just watching down the footage or reading the script and seeing, or do you kind of like sit and watch some cut version of it and then kind of pick different moments of the movie that might be interesting? Or
movies come much later in the process because a lot of the times you don't get the feature until you're very close to the end. Mostly because the movie's being edited the entire time. Sometimes you're lucky and we're able to get a feature far enough in advance that we can kind of get a sense of, okay, this is the direction they're heading. Sometimes you get a feature that completely changes. Like, I've worked on a few where you got an early cut and then you watch like, this is completely different than where we started. But no, mostly what it is the gathering of the materials happens, those interviews, that B-roll, and then sometimes your producer, and this is kind of how it was toward the end, where the producer would kind of write a script, or that we would have a script writer. We had a terrific script writer at Mob Scene who would just kind of read through all the transcripts and try to, break it down into like pods almost, so that you had this like cohesive thought narrative of how the film was assembled, or, interesting topics on the film or something like that. That happened more often than not at the end, which I really appreciated because the process of trying to do that on your own is just a lengthy process. You're just watching everything. You're trying to find moments. And the script was always such that you could change it if things weren't working. Like,
but you had an outline to work off of.
Exactly. Because paper, you're reading a transcript and then you hear what they say and you're like, oh, that's not what they meant when they said that. So like you change things as you go. Then you find like those moments in the B-roll, like, oh, the director is having this great conversation that sort of highlights more this point that was discussed earlier. So you take out a bunch of lines because you've got the director saying what you could have had someone say in an interview, but hearing it from them is more interesting.
I mean, this is basically a documentary.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting is that a lot of people don't think of it that way, but that's kind of
like the way you're describing it, like it's the exact same workflow for a documentary.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, for a documentary, normally I still do everything with an offline online process. Are you doing the same thing for BTS or are you just going straight out of the Avid?
Well, it depends on the situation. We were shooting relatively most of our stuff was 1080. We weren't working in Avid. We were working in Premiere. Most content houses work in Premiere.
Wow.
There aren't as many that work in Avid. So you were also kind of siloed in that. Like,
interesting.
You would share projects, but you had to make sure that you didn't overwrite somebody else's project. Like there was, there was a little bit more tricky than working in an Avid environment.
These like vignettes or these whatever pieces you did, how long were they?
It would vary. I mean, sometimes you'd be asked to do like a 3-minute marketing piece for something. And then I've cut pieces. The first Avatar documentary that Rob Glowacki and I cut was originally, I think, an hour and a half. And then I think it came down in time.
Oh my God. It's just a feature.
It is.
It's just a doc feature.
Yeah, it is. I think that's where it got interesting for me, was that suddenly there were these long form opportunities to do things. Look, I love a good 15, 20-minute piece. Those are great. I've cut a lot of those. But when I got to do stuff that was longer form, which I did a lot of in probably the last 5-6 years I was there, that stuff I love.
You were just talking about footage. I just wanted to know what your process is in terms of organizing the footage. Do you kind of break it out into different sections? Like you were saying, there's the visual effects, and then, we're talking about this scene with the director working with the actors and all that. Like, what's your process of starting, I guess, on a project?
Well, and this is going to be probably different for every editor, right? Yeah. Because just like in our scripted world, it's different for every editor.
Exactly, yeah.
I like to go through the B-roll first. That was kind of always my main thing. Just separate this material out into sections that kind of made sense. Okay, here we're spending a lot of time in this particular set. We're doing a piece on this set. Let's make sure we have all the pieces for that set. I would pull out all the director conversations. So whatever those were, I'd put those in sort of a sequence so that I could go back to those. I would always look for, if we had a costume walkthrough, like that would be its own thing. And those might be shot over a series of days. I'm always looking for really kind of scopy, big sort of action beats that we got in B-roll that shows camera, because you always want to show reference of some sort. This is one of those things that when we training or teaching, mentoring young people to cut this kind of material, it's just that you don't want really static shots. You want shots that have some mobility to them, and you always want to kind of see the reference of the camera somewhere in there to remind people that this is what you're seeing is happening. You can see the movie for this. Like, I want to pull back and see as much as I can of what's going on around while they're shooting. So I looked for those moments, and you just start building these buckets of material. That would be my first process. And then usually go through and read the script and then start breaking out my sound bites in buckets as well. Movie comes later, and then that's the same kind of thing. I mean, a trailer editor will do a similar type of thing, which is you break down the film. You're looking for action shots. You're looking for close-ups. You're looking for reactions. All that kind of stuff that you can then pepper throughout this thing.
Okay, cool.
And how much of the work are you doing is ending up on the DVD versus is ending up in some other kind of distribution? Okay,
so now you're getting into a couple of different areas. So EPK, electronic press kit, is right. Okay, so that idea is not really in existence as much these days, or at least it's taken a different type of form, right? So originally this idea was conceived to take sound bites, B-roll, and a small amount of B-roll, and then 1 or 2 what we would call featurettes, put a press kit together to give to media junkets, right? So it's at the junket or it's at you're sending it off to a network or something, and then they would either use the pre-prepared thing or they would piece it together themselves for something. I did a lot of those early on. Like that was part of the job. You'd get the job. You'd have to do the EPK kit as well.
Yeah.
Today, we still do sort of the bites and B-roll side of that, but it's not specifically for junket type materials as much. A lot of that gets sent, it's for the influencers or YouTube.
Yeah, I was going to say it's got to be much more for the TikTok stuff.
Exactly.
Right?
It's different in that respect. And yeah, you still prepare small featurettes or stuff that goes on YouTube or goes to the different channels, right? So now you're talking about like TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes those will be different. Like it won't be the same featurette that you cut going on TikTok that goes on Instagram. There'll be something different about it that's more appropriate for the Instagram audience, that's more appropriate for the TikTok audience, that's more appropriate for a YouTube audience. Because they have the data, right? The data that tells you what age groups watch these things. And so you often can change them to fit that demographic. And then the larger pieces, less, sure, they might go on a Blu-ray if they actually make a Blu-ray of the movie that's coming out these days, which kind of that stuff's coming back.
Or even decide to put DVD extras on a Blu-ray anymore, which I feel like is less and less common these days.
iTunes and Roku and all these other places where you can buy movies, you get the iTunes extras.
Or like, I guess in Netflix, they have extras and you can click on that. And sometimes they have BTS things of Stranger Things or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. And that's where all of it goes these days.
Gotcha.
So it still lives. It's just in a different form at this point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When you're cutting this stuff, like a documentary, you may get stuff in there that it's a director having a tense moment or whatever. Or is there ever like a direction to be like, okay, we're here to focus on the movie, not on like the drama. Like it's not a reality show, right? The goal is to really talk about the art more than the artists, I guess. But I'm just curious how you deal with, I don't know, sensitive stuff like that, or if the studio is like, no, get rid of this. We can't like frame something like this. Like, is that something you guys would have to deal with? Would you guys try to like push the envelope at all, or?
No, primarily because the studios are very specific about the type of material that they want out there. And you're told early on, like, stay away from this or stay away from that. We don't want to talk about this.
It sounds like from the beginning, basically, though, like, this is what we're getting. This is what you're cutting. There's no try to just like
don't
make whatever you want.
No, Darkness, our movie here.
Here's a free foot. Like just
and
do
there
whatever.
Are some that do it and do it well. Like there's times. What was it? David Fincher's Alien 3, right? So there's a documentary about that and the complicated nature of making that. And sometimes the studios will embrace that idea as long as it's not talking about anybody getting hurt, as long as it's not defaming anyone.
Yeah.
You can talk about sort of things not going the way they were planned. The difficult elements of production. They don't shy away from that as much. And I think you get some there's a Blade Runner documentary that talks about how miserable Harrison Ford was, working on that film because it was difficult for him. It was not an easy shoot. And he's always been vocal about that. And so for them, Warner Brothers to finally embrace that idea of putting that on the dock and actually some of the documentaries that I'm talking about were all made by the same producer. So he managed to get some of that interesting stuff out there.
I've always liked that stuff. Because it's more interesting. It's more like these are people stories. Like productions are human stories. They don't always go well. Things don't always go right.
Right.
The makeup prosthetics actually takes 7 hours to put on as opposed to 2 hours, and that causes X, Y, and Z. Like these are human problems. It's interesting. I always find when you're able to kind of actually see that stuff or when they talk about it. You're right. Most of it ends up being that the actors will talk about it themselves 15 years later.
Right.
And they're like, oh man, I had a terrible time on that movie. And then you look at all the interviews at the time and they're like, this was incredible experience.
Yeah.
And then 20 years
or you
later,
just kind of see their eyes and you're like, right now I can see that you're in pain. It's hard for you to say this. No, and I think that, part of that's where I think eventually for me, beyond the fact that I burned myself out because I was working too much, you get to a point where you're like, I was watching other documentaries that were out in the world and, you're seeing sort of the conflict and the resolution of conflict and that kind of stuff. And, when you realize you can't really do that in this, and that's not, it's just the way the system's set up. It's not because you're not trying to tell a good story. It's, a lot of times, which always would make me laugh, they would say, fans would be like, well, why didn't you get such and such for the DVD? Because they didn't want to participate. Yeah. They weren't interested in participating in this. Then the thing gets ripped because it's missing 3 key actors. And you're like, well, we tried to do the best we could in this scenario. But as I was getting toward the end of what would be that part of my career, I started to feel more and more like the stories that I had been telling were not to be dismissive about it, but they were kind of like the movie gets made. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like at the end of the day, the movie got
comes
made.
Out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it came out. And so I would always try to look for the interesting, because you can, your mind can go one of two ways with this stuff. You can either decide that this is a miserable thing because it always ends the same way, or you can find the moments within it to go, oh, that's a fun thing to latch onto that I can really kind of tell a story for. Something like Hidden Figures, and you're talking about the experience of these women who did this, right? Like, what's the historical significance of this?
Yeah, that would be cool to be like, let's find old archival photos of what it looks like and compare that to set and blah, 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 blah. Like,
and when I got to do stuff like that, it was super cool.
Yeah.
And I like retrospective pieces that looked back at stuff when people talk about making movies and that they were proud of and excited about when 20 years ago or something. Like, I love those type of things. But in the end, it was just sort of like, I want a new challenge.
Yeah. In Los Angeles, is there like a community of BTS editors? Do they all like get together and hang out and know each other? Is that, like, because basically most of my experience has been in scripted so far, and you get to a point where you're like, oh, all the scripted people know each other. Is that similar in BTS EPK? Like, do all those?
No.
They go bowling?
No, it's a little bit more siloed than that. There's been some shift in that. So you're working with the same people, right? So Mob Scene employed a great group of editors, and I worked with a lot of great people there, and we all knew each other, and we all knew what we were doing, and we were all talking, but there wasn't really like a get together. Like, you might get nominated for your Clio's or a Golden Trailer or something like that, kind of like their equivalent of the Eddie, right? Like, so you would have that award show and you might see people there, but we didn't know each other, right? My friend Joe Valero recently, in the last few years, started this thing called Industry Night, where he just sends out an open invitation for people to get together from that world. And that's trailers and marketing and behind the scenes. And he was doing it once a year, and then he started doing it twice a year. Now I think he's trying to do it every quarter, but that's the equivalent of Cuts and Cups, like this idea of bringing community
together.
Right.
Yeah.
Which didn't really exist all that much, at least to my knowledge. Again, we're siloed. So it's very possible that someone like over at Trailer Park or one of the other places had started doing something like this, and I just wasn't aware of it.
Well, I did want to ask, you kind of hinted at it before about you being burnt out, but I did want to know why you made the jump from BTS to scripted. Also, I feel like that there was this idea between not everybody, but some people who have this like, well, I was an editor in this one field and I want to be an editor. I want to be in the same position in a different field because I'm an editor.
Sure.
But I know that you went to an assistant editor. So what was kind of your thought process behind that? Why did you make the jump to scripted?
Okay, so this jump to scripted happened because I really did work too hard and burned myself out. I was working on a series of projects. Like I said, I like to take on these hour-long documentaries whenever I could, and I stacked a bunch of them in a way that probably for 2.5 years, I just went from one to the other. I would take like a week off occasionally, but I wasn't a big vacation person. I'm a Gen X person, and so I kind of got this work mentality. When I get into something, I get into it. Like, I put my whole self into the thing, which is good work ethic and also a little detrimental to your mental health and your physical health. So I was not healthy. I was roughly 25, 30 pounds heavier. I was not sleeping as well as I should have been sleeping. I had gone through a divorce in early 2011, and everything in my life is shifting in some way. I met a terrific woman, Amelia, who is my wife, and I started to feel this pull of change. Instead of wanting to be at work all day, I wanted to be home at night. I wanted to spend time with her. But I kept feeling this other side of my personality pulling me, saying like, you got work to do, you got work to do, you got work to do.
I know that feeling way too much.
Yeah. And so I got involved in all these like longer projects, one right after another. And then I got the opportunity to cut on to Steven Spielberg behind the scenes projects, one for The Post and then one for Ready Player One. And I wanted to do the absolute best job that I could. I put a lot of pressure on myself to do good work. And through The Post and then into Ready Player One. Ready Player One was a project that I had loved the book, and I was desperate to work on this thing. And now I was given an hour-long documentary to do on it. And I just stressed myself out. I just really put so much pressure on myself. I was not sleeping. I was getting up at absurd hours to go into work and start doing things. And it was rough. It was like, I didn't realize I was doing this to myself. It just felt like what I was supposed to do. And I remember that project finished and Laurent was great. And like everything worked out. Like that was a good experience on that level. And then I finally decided I needed a vacation. So I took a vacation and I was with my wife. We were in New York and she had worked on Broadway for a long time. So we were going to shows and I was in a play and I was seeing The Iceman Cometh with Denzel Washington at the time. After the second act, I'm sitting there and I'm like 3 rows from the front and all of a sudden I feel my entire body just start heating up.
Oh, wow.
Like it was wild. Like I'm looking down and I had a Fitbit on at the time and I'm watching my heart rate go sitting still.
Oh my God.
And it's going up and up. And it got to like 177 beats per second.
Oh
just
my God.
Sitting still. And I was like, I got to get myself out of here. Like, I don't want to pass out in front of Denzel Washington. Like, I got to move. And so I got myself up into the back and there was a really nice usher back there. It was like, did you eat something today? Like, do you need, like, I had dinner before I came here. Like, I should be okay. He went and got me some orange juice. That wasn't helping. My heart rate would not slow down. House manager came, grabbed me and pulled me out into the lobby area. And I started to go numb, like my whole body. I lost some feeling in my arms first and then my legs. And I thought I was having a heart attack. I'm like, this is it. I'm going to die in a theater in New York. You know, that sounds dramatic, but at the time, that's what it felt like. And they called an ambulance and an ambulance came. And they started giving me oxygen and they took me to the hospital. My wife caught up with them and we all went together. And I was in the hospital. My heart rate finally came down. I was starting to relax. And the doctor comes in and goes, so it wasn't a heart attack. How stressed are you at work? And I was like, she's like, you just had a panic attack. She's like, has this happened before? And I was like, no. And she's just like, okay. And she starts talking through it. She's like, look, this can kill you. Like, you're lucky that this didn't push it further because I don't know that your heart could have taken it. She's like, you're overweight. There's problems here. And I was just like, oh, and I remember the look on Amelia's face. And we hadn't been married for very long at this point. And I remember thinking to myself, I never want to see that look on her face again. And I was like, some things have to change. And I came back to Los Angeles and I started thinking about like, what am I going to do here? How can I change this? And the first thing was health. And I started working on that, like finding a workout regimen and starting to run and do things that I had done in years, really changing my diet. How am I going to lose weight? Those kind of things. And with that underway, then I started thinking about, am I happy doing this stuff anymore? And not to say that I didn't. The biggest pull for Mob Scene for me was not necessarily the work. It was the people. I really love the people.
Yeah.
And I worked with a lot of incredible people.
It's hard to like leave that.
I didn't want to leave that.
Yeah.
And change is something that, is inevitable, right? So I just kind of tried to remember that, like, okay, but what does that look like and what would I want to do? And I had a chance encounter with somebody in Scripted, this editor who was an assistant at the time who was starting to cut, Natalie Beauchamp. And Natalie had worked at Mob Scene. She was a editor at Mob Scene with me for about a year where we shared a wall, basically. So we got to be friends that way, but I hadn't seen her in a while. And I bumped into her at a coffee shop. And we start talking. She's telling me about working in scripted television as an assistant. She had been working with Zach Arnold as his assistant. And I was like, that's cool. I didn't know you could do that, go over into that world. And then this came to mind, this chance meeting that happened like 3 or 4 months earlier came to mind while I was trying to think about what I wanted to do. And I'm like, well, that was the whole point in being out here in the first place, was to hopefully work with Hank on a feature. Could I really take a step back and go in as an assistant and do this? And I started talking to people about this. Like, turns out my friend Joe Valero and you 2 guys that were TV editors, Doc Krautzer was one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Joe and Doc had worked together at another content house, Blue Collar, and they were friendly. And another editor by the name of Ben Bumgardner. Those guys very willingly had a really nice conversation with me and started telling me yes, and Ben had a great thing to say, which I thought was interesting and I kind of carry with me in terms of how I present myself and how I do my work as an assistant. It's just like, look, there's a lot of assistants in this business. The great assistants are the ones that work all the time. And I was like, well, I want to be that. Again, Gen X mentality, work hard, that kind of thing. So I was like, yeah, how could I do this? What do I need? I bumped I reached out to Natalie again because I'm like, hey, you were the one that sort of set me on this course. Could we get lunch and talk?
Yeah.
When we went to lunch, we talked. She's like 9 months pregnant at this point. And I was like, what was going on here? She's like, oh, I was pregnant before, but didn't want to say anything at that point. I was like, oh, okay. So we had this wonderful conversation. She gave me all of the union. This is how you get in. This is go to these meetups and just start meeting people and all of that stuff. And I was like, all right, I think I'm gonna try this. But it's a conversation because now I'm married and I'm in a relationship where I'm bringing in income to the house. This was going to be a step back because financially, what I was making as an editor, I wasn't going to be making as an assistant coming into.
Right.
So now I needed to get my house in order and figure out the financial side of this before making the jump. And I talked to several people while I was doing this that said I could never do that. I could never take a step back financially, even though they wanted to work in the scripted world, but they couldn't figure out because they've set their life up.
Oh, these were other people.
Other editors in this profession.
Okay.
Yeah. They just were like, I can't do that. And I had been in a place where, if I could put X amount of money away just as a safety net for that first maybe like off period of time, I felt like I could be okay.
Yeah.
And so I just started doing that, just, saving the money, meeting with people, being completely transparent with Mob Scene about what I was doing, which I highly recommend if this is like something you want to do and you have a good relationship with the company that you're at, being transparent about things.
So it was really kind of someone coming to you suggesting the assistant editor role.
No, she didn't say assistant editor. What she said to me was like, you might have to assist kind of thing. But there was a reality in my head that
that's what I was wondering.
Way you're going to make that jump. I mean, some people, and I think I may know 3 that actually did it from cutting a behind the scenes material to being able to jump into editing in a different capacity, but they would take on an independent feature or something like that.
Right.
And I wanted to work in TV. I knew that was where I wanted to start, and I wanted to understand the entire process from the ground up. And then for me meant go be an assistant. Lose the ego, lose all of that, take the step back and let it rip and see what happens.
One of the things is always the big argument. I feel like I guess the big argument among post PAs is
how do you get your days
and where should you go get your days?
Yeah.
I think we've had every manner of person on the show at this point to talk about every single different 10 million thousand ways they've gotten their days. But if you break it up into EPK, BTS, reality, and then indie scripted, which are really your 3 avenues for doing this kind of thing.
Commercials. You could do it in commercials too.
I don't know. I'm just wondering if you were looking at the landscape now and you were talking to a post PA and they had one of these 3 avenues to try and go and pursue their days. Do you have a recommendation of what you would tell somebody to put their eggs into which basket?
Oftentimes it depends on the person that I'm talking to because you can see the personality, and sometimes the personality is such that they're like, oh, this person is so absolutely incredible. They're going to be a post PA on a show and someone's going to be like, we need to bump this person to apprentice now. And we all know a few of those. Like people have had that opportunity and done it successfully, and that's great. But those are still rare opportunities.
And then you see the people that are like, oh, need some help.
You need some help.
And I think those are the people that need to go work for a little bit and sort of understand the roles and everything else. Post-PAing is great because it puts you in the room right away with a bunch of assistants, an editor or 2 editors in some situations where I feel like you're getting that experience. Maybe do that to start with for 1 show, 2 shows max. Then go get your days if you haven't gotten them yet. Like that's important because if you're in your early 20s, you have time. I'm not going to argue that point. Like I'm not going to say, but if your goal is you want to get into scripted as soon as possible, well, then you're going the reality route or you're going the BTS route. Like I think those are trailer house. Like those are the ways to go and get it. What I like about the BTS trailer house route is you get insurance and you get vacation time and
you get PTO.
You get that PTO. You get that, the health days and stuff that you need. A lot of times, especially when you're young, that's helpful stuff, the regular paycheck coming in. Because the indie route, which I've been on an indie film that falls apart midstream and you're not getting paid for 2 of the weeks that you just did.
That's a good point.
A lot of people have been there. And if you're relying on income to pay the rent because you just got established here in LA, sometimes having that full-time job for even 100 to 200 days, give it a year, see how that goes. And you get your days, you get stabilized because you're paying your rent now. I think that works. I really do.
Also with the indie stuff, which I've heard before too, is that the job will end and the person needs like 14 more days left or like
exactly.
10. And every time I hear those stories, I'm like, oh, you
or
can't
2
just,
days.
Yeah, I'm like,
one
oh
day
my God, I feel
or
so
something.
bad. Like,
Yeah.
can you stretch that? Yeah.
And that's tough. And you're just sort of
it
like,
is tough.
oh man. But, the other side of that job too, the BTS job, is you're stable for that period of time. And when you are ready to go, everyone knows what those positions are. Like there's no assumption that if you're an assistant at a place like that you're a lifer. Assistants often will change out, and and that's okay. People accept that that's part of it, that you may have a different interest in your career. And I've had friends that have gone that route and been very successful. Plus, it also gives you stability while you got your days. Now you've also got stability while you're working for your first scripted show.
Yeah, and you can save up some money so that when you do leave, if you need to take time off or
100%.
whatever it is, you have now gotten a little cushion. I wanted to know too, are there any skills from your BTS days that you felt transferred better than you expected into your scripted time? Or did you feel like that you kind of had to start from scratch?
That's a good question.
Also, I'm going to add to this, were you going from Premiere to Avid?
Yes.
And then, so that was a whole other thing that you probably had to learn.
Well, here's the good news is that I knew Avid holistically. I had worked on Avid in commercials, like Hank Shop was built on Avid. And then I had revisited Avid a couple of times when I was working on the Avatar behind the scenes stuff. Sometimes we would get sent down to Jim's company to help with some stuff down there. So I would revisit Avid everyone. So it wasn't unfamiliar to me. It just was, now this is going to date me, I hadn't used Avid in terms of exports since we were doing that to tape. So
Right.
at that point I was like, oh, right, I gotta relearn how to get things out of this machine. But that was just time on the job kind of thing. A lot of people, and I'm sure you've talked to them, are like really nervous about going from Premiere into Avid. And I'm just like, it's just being on it every day. Once you're on it, you feel like, oh, this all starts to become secondhand. And then you learn from other people around you, like shortcuts and things that you may not have thought. So that part scared me less. I did really feel at the beginning, to be completely vulnerable on this topic, like, what do I have to offer? Like, here I am. I'm in my 40s coming out of working in this behind the scenes world. And it is not the same thing.
Because how long were you in behind the scenes?
25 years.
Wow.
I was going to say, that's interesting that your thought process is what I have to offer, as opposed to because in my mind, I'm like somebody who's done BTS for 25 years. I'd be like, that's
you have so much to offer because you have so much
very unique
experience. And you're
in my mind, I'm like, it's a very unique experience, and you know how to do, a lot of unscripted management. I don't know. I could come up with a lot of justifications for why BTS, you already know how to work with studios. You understand the politics of talking to executives. There's already a lot of stuff there that you're like, you don't have to teach this person X, Y, and Z thing.
And I would come to that stuff, but it would take me a minute. And I was, like you said, I've been in the room with executives and I understand the politics of being in that room. I have worked with so many different people that were different producers. Mob Scene probably had 10, 12 producers. And I was able to work with every one of them, and every one of them had different needs and handled their projects differently. And you have to kind of learn how to be a Swiss Army knife. Like, what does this person need me to be in this moment? Oh, wait, I'm working with this person. What do they need me to be? So you learn those skills. So I had that, and I knew that. And I also understood that the technical side of it was something that I could pick up relatively quickly. Like, that stuff can be taught. Although turnovers, when you don't know what that is, kind of sounds like, oh my God, am I going to screw up the entire project? And then you learn, no, it's fine. They can fix things.
I was terrified of turnovers for
the first
long time.
The first time you do it, you're kind of like, what the this has got to be so exact. And am I going to,
first time I did my first 15 turnovers all had issues. When they trusted me to do turnovers for the first time as an apprentice, and I kept fucking it up, and I was like, oh fuck, this is it's
you're never going to work again. No.
Exactly.
Everybody's like, we get it. We've all been there, that kind of thing. Yeah, I understood the value in working with an editor because I worked with assistants, and I knew what I would like assistants to be in those situations. I knew how I liked to mentor those assistants. Those type of things really kind of gave me enough confidence to say, okay, I think I can make this shift. I also had learned I'd started meditating as one of those things to sort of to calm myself down.
Right.
And in doing that, I became a calmer person to be around. I'm Italian. I'm from Jersey. My, my energy level and, enthusiasm for life can often be at 11. And I needed to figure out a way to chill out. And meditation helped me do that. And in that, I ended up being, and a few people have said this to me, and I appreciate hearing it, but I don't even think about it. They're like, you're really calm to work with. And that's not something I realized I offered for a while. Like I never thought of myself as being particularly calm, but that has really kind of been one of my kind of calling cards now, is this idea that I'm not afraid of stuff. Nothing really freaks me out anymore. I just kind of I take it all in. I hear what's being said. And then I'm like, okay, we got this. We'll figure this out kind of thing. So I was bringing these tools with me, these, experiences with me. And that's what I really learned at the end of the day, was that this 25 years of experience that I had, there was a lot in there.
It was more transferable than you might have initially thought.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you, while we're on this topic, I do find it really fascinating, especially for me. I am the type of person that, oh my God, I made a mistake. I'm going to be fired. I'm never going to work in this town again.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to recommend me, or like this person doesn't like me and they're not going to want to work with me. And I get really stressed about that.
Yep.
I know you just mentioned meditation. Is there anything else that you do to kind of calm yourself?
Breathing.
And breathe? Like, how do you kind of work through that, I guess? I'm wondering.
3 words: ketamine.
1 word: meth.
2 words: horse tranquilizer.
That'd put me down, man. I'm super calm now. Okay, so a couple of things that stress management for me is just I have changed pretty much the way I do everything now. Like, it's so funny to watch me 10 years ago and me now. And I don't know if part of that is age or part of that is just me learning the value in slowing down in life. But, I read a lot more now. I'm kind of obsessed with taking time out of my day to just read a book for a while.
What are you reading? Anything?
Anything.
Or fiction?
I will read biography. I was doing a lot of reading, especially at that time. I had discovered an author, Ryan Holiday, who wrote a book called The Obstacle is the Way, which is a Stoic philosophy book, right? So it's really kind of distilling Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius down into something that, I could understand. He gives a lot of real world examples and stuff in that book. And I was like, oh, this is fascinating. I didn't study philosophy in college, but
Meditations is one of the books that I recommend to post PAs to read. I'm always
it's an excellent book.
I'm read Out of the Cut, Making the Cut, and then meditations.
Yeah. It's it literally is a bedside table book. Keep it with you. There's a lot in there.
I will say this is also just funny to me that it's funny that your BTS career was so stressful that a career in scripted editorial.
I would have never thought that either.
The calmer of it. That's the calm. I'm in my zen is just so it's just oh my God, that's so crazy.
Well, I think, what it is I changed myself ultimately. It's not necessarily the child. It's that the location changed, but I'm still me. I just had to take what was going on inside my head and figure out ways to navigate the situation differently.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, you were the one who was putting the stress on yourself.
Yeah.
And so I could see that being okay, this is the moment that I realized, okay, I need to make changes in my life, as opposed to, I'm in this BTS.
Yeah.
It's the BTS. I'm just going to change in a different area.
I'm 100% responsible for the choices in my life. And that's, again, coming out of the Stoic sort of mindset, which is control what you can control, right? Mm-hmm. I can't control anybody that I work with, but I can control how I react in this moment. Right.
Yeah.
And I try really hard to take it in, but not take it on. I'm here to listen and to be present and hear what's going on with you. And then I'm going to take that information and I'm going to process it. And I'm going to come back to you with a response, not a reaction. And that's kind of an important way for me to operate now. A physical sense of things. I run, I work out, that calms me. That's kind of where I'll take a minute. I'll go outside, jump rope for 5 minutes or something, something that will take my mind off of whatever thing might be stressing me out in the moment so I can breathe. And I've also learned breath work is important, and I try, and I'm not as proficient at it, and I definitely don't adhere to it as much as I probably should. But that idea of if you do take 5 minutes and you just sit there and you breathe for 5 minutes, everything goes down. I mean, I wear an Aura ring that sort of tracks my sleep and tracks my heart and all of this stuff and gives me information. And I can watch literally in real time after that breath work, like my entire heart rate and everything just dips.
Man, there's nothing like getting your mind off stress management than putting yourself through pain of running and working out.
Right.
And you're just like, I'm so oh my God, my side, my feet, my body, my legs, my breath.
Exactly. And then you're like, great, I feel better now.
And you're like, what was I stressed about? My legs are falling off.
Right. I got back from the run yesterday and I was like in such a good mood. And my wife was like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm great.
She was like, you left and you seemed a bit off. Did you go to take ketamine or meth?
Did you stop at the comic book store?
Did you stop?
No.
Yeah.
I did stop at the farm feed store for a horse tranquilizer.
Yes, exactly.
So you decide you want to make this jump. I'm just curious, on a practical level, how did you do it? What was your first show? Who was the person that, who gave you those opportunities?
Gave me the shock. So on a practical level, sort of the assignments that I gave myself, every day I was doing something to move the needle forward, right? I knew what the goal was. The goal was get into scripted. What am I going to do to break that down?
And you're working at Mob
Scene at the time. Yeah. And so this is like, I would do this when I was working on a BTS like documentary. I would break it down into like, okay, this is what you need to accomplish every day to hit the goal of having this cut done by here, so that then you have time to polish it before you have to show it to the producer. And so I would, at the beginning of every project, break this down. And I would oftentimes just put sticky notes up or something like that to help me get through this. And that was the same approach, which was, okay, what do I need to do? Well, I need to be sending emails and trying to at least have conversations with people. I need to be spending time just, I was on LinkedIn Learning and I'm like going through Avid just to like refresh and take care of that kind of stuff. And then I was going to meetups regularly, like anything I could find, the Blue Collar Post Collective or any of the user group meetups.
Creative Cow.
Yeah,
whatever.
Exactly. Whatever was happening in town, I was going to, because I just needed to meet people. So I'm doing this stuff and then I'm kind of writing out like goals for myself. Like, all right, so I want to have by the end of this week, at least one scripted editor on the books to have a phone call with, or like that kind of stuff. And it's weird if you like put these goals down and you start to manifest things that are happening because your reality is what you're imagining it to be. So I started I grabbed a Excel spreadsheet and I started putting on it like all the shows that I thought that I was interested in, that I felt like, okay, I did 2 groups. I did like, okay, these are shows that I feel like I could start on tomorrow. And these are shows that I feel like these are a stretch. So maybe these are like, and they were more VFX science fiction type shows like Star Trek Discovery and stuff like that, that I wanted to work on, but I had no way of I don't even know VFX right now. I don't even know what that looks like. That's way down the road kind of thing. So I'm putting these lists together and I'm looking at the editors that I like from these shows and I'm putting them down on the sheet. And I'm like, who are their assistants? And I'm like doing this. So I'm breaking this world down because I needed to understand what it was. And in doing that, I started to feel confident about things. All the time, I'm just talking to my friend Natalie, and I just kept meeting with people. Like, it was kind of wild. I didn't know I had so many friends that knew TV people. Talking to Doc got me to Amelia Allwarden, who was really kind and gracious and gave me some of her time, and we talked about stuff. I gave myself a timeline. I said to Mob Scene, I sat with my boss, and I was like, look, I started this journey in August. In October, I sat down with him and I said, look, at the end of the year, I'm going to go freelance. So I want you to take me off payroll. I'm not going to freelance for anybody else. I'm not looking for open company. What I'm looking for is freedom, because I need to be able to move around and go meet people kind of on my time. And he's just like, totally understand. So he gave me a lot of freedom to be able to set this up and do it, which I'm genuinely grateful for. But through that, I just kept thinking to myself, I'm doing this. And then out of the blue, like 2 weeks into October, I get a call from Natalie on a Tuesday. She's like, hey. I'm like, hey. She's like, what are you doing right now? I'm like, working. She's like, right. She's like, I forgot you're still there. She's just like, so I got a show. And I was like, oh, great. I'm like, congratulations. And she had an assistant. So I didn't even think that this would be anything more than me talking to her about the success. Great. She's just like, you want to come assist me? And I was like, whoa, what's going on? She's like, well, my assistant, she's like stepping away for a while and I could use your help and I know you would figure this out. So I was like, okay. I don't know. I'm like, when does this start? She's like, Thursday. And I'm like, okay. And I'm looking around my office at Mob Scene, which is like got posters on every wall and the whole place is set up. And I'm like, okay, packing up the room, going to be out of here in 2 days, you know?
Wow.
And so she was just like, got to talk to this post supervisor. They're not going to want you. I was just like, oh. And then she's just said, yeah. She's like, you'll talk to her, you'll get the story, and it'll be fine. So I get on the phone with this post supervisor. Her name was Sheila Phillips. In Sheila's defense, what she wanted was Natalie to be supported. She wanted someone that could be there and help her. So she begrudgingly took me on and said, okay, this is really what Natalie wants. She's like, but if this becomes a problem, I'm going to have to find somebody else for her. And every day going into that job, I felt like I was getting hit in the face with a 2x4. Like I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was figuring it out. I had two really great assistants, Matt and Yuri, on that show, who were really kind, and they just walked me through everything. Like those guys are wholly responsible for making sure I succeeded on that show. And I really appreciate both of them for that. At a point, we were like 2 or 3 months into the show, and I turn around at one point and I'm noticing that Sheila's like hanging out in my room more often. This was the first time that I realized that part of what I had been doing in my own personal life, health-wise, was now coming out in my personality. And she says to me, I'm like, Sheila, what's going on? I'm like, do you need anything? She's like, no, I just like to hang out in here. You calm me down. She literally said, you calm me down. And I was like, well, I've done something right here.
You're
I
like
guess.
a therapy dog.
Oh, yeah. And that was the moment for me where I said, I can do this job.
I would say, kind of building off of that, you were able to make the jump from BTS to scripted.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, so far, I mean, you've only been doing it now for what, 6 years, 7 years?
7
years. And you've worked on a good amount of shows already. So you found a good amount of success in doing it.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate.
What misconceptions do you think scripted people have about BTS, the EPK world, or those editors that, you think
well, early
you
on,
would dispel?
I think I felt, and this is going to be more of a feeling than anything else, right?
Sure.
Like you feel like you're an outsider.
Yeah.
You feel like you're coming from a place that no one else really respects in some way. And I had one or two offhanded comments along the line when I was first kind of going to the meetup groups and stuff from other assistants even that were like, what is that?
Really?
Yeah. And that was kind of weird to me. People who had been established assistants for a while, like looking down on it in terms of the type of work that it was.
That's so weird. Because it's not like it's not easier.
No, but I think it's like
it's not like, oh, this is the easy job.
No, but there is, and it, look, I think we've all faced
like
this.
The same with reality. When people shit from reality, I'm
right.
like, reality's fucking hard.
It's hard work. It's the same kind of thing, right? Or a feature editor or assistant that doesn't want a television assistant working on their projects because you don't have feature experience. I got that a lot when I was looking for my first feature, like more than once, more than a few times. I got that like sort of response from an established assistant that was like, well, you don't have you don't have feature experience. And I'm like, it's kind of the same thing. You do a couple of different things. Like,
yeah, it's not that
it's
crazy.
still the same processes for the most part.
It's so interesting because I feel like whenever I hear someone who is on a feature and they went to TV or vice versa, and I'll ask them like, well, what really is the difference? And they're always like, nothing. Yeah. It's like the same. But at the same time, I found that when I worked in TV for a little bit, everybody that I knew in the cutting room knew TV. Like no one that I worked with had also been in features, right, or vice versa.
There's not a lot of crossover.
There's not crossover.
No. That's why I wanted to be in both because I feel like you're more valuable. Like I immediately go, oh, if you can do both worlds and I have this other experience, I have this BTS experience. We do a lot of montaging, those kind of things like in that BTS world, in that feature world, in that featurette world, marketing world, and I have commercial experience. So I'm like, I want to be as much cross-pollinated as I can because I feel like I have more to offer.
Right. Yeah.
In my head, I just want to be a Swiss Army knife for the editor that I'm with and be there in any capacity that they need me to be there.
I've only done one TV thing ever, but I think the only thing is just like the politics are different. Mm-hmm. That's it.
And the pecking order is slightly different in terms of like, you're instead of...
But again, you could learn it in an afternoon.
I know,
You learn it, if you had experience on any type of scripted television show, your ability to translate that to a scripted feature cutting room, like...
Just the idea of the director being in charge of something instead of in television, the showrunner's in charge. The directors are kind of, they're there for the short period of time unless they're an executive producer on the show and then they move on. And so that's a different dynamic. But like beyond that, there's not a lot.
It sounds like I might know the answer to this, but is there anything that you miss about BTS now that you're unscripted?
There are times where I miss putting a piece together. There are times where I'm like, I did a short stint at Mob Scene during, like, after the writer's strike when a lot of people were still looking for work. And there is a fun part of seeing a piece from start to finish that I still get a thrill out of, especially with some distance from it, where I'm like, yeah, that's still cool and fun. I'm always impressed with friends of mine that are still cutting pieces in that world and have worked on some big projects, and I get to see stuff of theirs. But I love scripted so much, and I love the community of scripted so much, and just getting to spend time with that community, I feel like that's a real gift. I didn't have that really on that side. Right. And I think that that's where this pull is for me. You know, besides loving television and features, like, I feel like getting to do this, it's such a gift. And like, I will never take that for granted. So being able to do this and do it with this community, I can't ask for anything more than that, really. And if they were to take this all away from me tomorrow and be like, you're done, I'd be like, but I did it. You know?
We always like to ask people is if they could choose anything to work on, something that hasn't been made yet, like a book or a comic book, or
dream job,
a
or
reboot
dream
or something.
person.
Yeah, I feel like you might have a
with.
good answer to this.
A dream job. Well, as a giant comic book fan, I often struggle with the idea of would I want to work on a movie for a subject matter that I love, or would I just want to experience it in the theater? And then I struggle with that because it's like, I, as a giant Marvel fan growing up, like there is like literally, I have a cutout of like Marvel, just a logo that's been in my journal for years now as like, someday, like a someday thing. And I'm, now I know they're rebooting the X-Men, and the X-Men are literally one of my all-time.
You're wearing an X-Men shirt.
I am wearing an X-Men t-shirt, but they are
studio.
One of my all-time favorite comics, so the opportunity to do something like that would be wild. And I think I would have a hard time saying no to that. But, the reality of it is I'm just so happy doing what I'm doing. I'm working with Nina Erb now, which to me has been an incredible experience. She's just an incredibly kind person, an incredibly talented editor. And at the end of the day, that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted a relationship with an editor where I felt like not only are we friendly with each other and can have a good conversation about stuff and stuff, but I'm doing work with somebody that really cares about the craft too. I feel like we're a good fit. And so I don't know what that future holds in that respect. I'm not leaving Nina unless she, is like, get away. Get away. I want to go somewhere else. Because I just genuinely appreciate the opportunity to work with her, and I'm grateful for that. But I also am like, this is just a good working relationship, and I want to keep this going. Yeah. That becomes what it's more about than the content. Totally. Like, the jobs are great, and I have fun with every job that I get to do, and I'm always very appreciative of that. But it's the people that matter.
Yeah.
All right, let's go into our last segment then.
Splice and spew.
Michael, do you have one? Or I think I have one.
You go first.
If you want me to go first. All right, I am going to spew about people who FaceTime in public. I absolutely hate people that are FaceTiming in public. I mean, it's so interesting because I remember the days where it was like, oh, it's rude to answer your phone when you're like around people, and now no one could give a fuck about it. And I see this mainly in the grocery store. People are FaceTiming their, whoever it is, their husbands, their boyfriends, girlfriends, kids, whatever it is. And they're just like, oh, is this the one that you want? Is this the one that you want? And I'm like, I can see into your house, ma'am. So it's not, and not only is it that, but they won't wear headphones either. So also the response can be heard by every single person. And so I'm like, this is just, we're getting out of hand. People, like, if you have a question, take a picture, call them, give them options, but like, let's not, FaceTiming is not a public activity. We need to FaceTime when we're in our own homes, privately. It's ridiculous.
That's why I bring headphones with me everywhere, because I agree. You can FaceTime I feel like as long as you have headphones. As long as you've got AirPods or some type of headphones in, like, and you're not speaking super loudly, like, then it's whatever. But I agree with you. It's super, especially on like, let's see people on like buses. Just see people on buses FaceTime.
Oh my God.
That really annoys the shit out of me.
I can't. Yeah. Headphones are like one thing because, yeah, you do have headphones. And if you're like trying to be really quick about it, like, oh, let me just like really quick show you this. But if you're like having a full on conversation with someone, like,
I agree.
I can't.
I think I've probably spliced. This is both a bit of a splice and a spew, but I've probably spliced about Waymos before. Man, I love Waymos. I think that's already established fact. If anybody knows me, I take Waymos everywhere. Well, okay, here's my spew. My spew is Waymos are getting a little bit more expensive, and I'm already noticing it, and it's already like pissing me off. And part of me is like, there was this beautiful era where Waymo was invite only, and I got the invite from a friend of mine, and so it was like only a small amount of people used the Waymos, and it was like cheap and really nice. And now the Waymos are like, all of my Waymo rides are like $10 more expensive than they used to be. I could deal with that, except for the fact that I am starting to get real sick of the fact that the general population does not know how to ride in a Waymo. They do not take care of them. They'll leave bottles, leave all kinds of random shit in a Waymo. Guys, we're moving into a new era of humanity with these crazy robot cars that are going to eventually mow us all down, i.e. Terminator, i.e. the creator, i.e. whatever. But in the meantime, before we are destroyed by our robot overlords, let's take care of the cabins. Please, for the love of God.
That's fair.
Let's not make this no vomiting in the Waymos, no smoking in the Waymos. Be nice. Be cordial in the Waymo. Let's enjoy it while we have it before it all gets shitified into terribleness.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I am a comic book person, so let's splice on some comics.
Go for it.
I am a giant fan of Absolute Batman, which is a new title that started over at DC a couple of years ago, written by Scott Snyder and drawn by Nick Dragotta, and it is by far the best sort of reinterpretation of the Batman mythos that I've seen and read. Nick's art is just outstanding and just really fun, and the idea that they've reinvented these characters, you know, everything from Batman straight on through Alfred and to the Rogues Gallery in a way that makes them more modern and interesting. And, you know, you take Bruce's millions away from him and turn him into somebody who didn't lose his parents right away. You know, like there's things about the way the character is written and the way that he interacts with some of these bad guys that were actually his friends before they became villains. And it just, the whole mythos that has been sort of recreated is just really fun and enjoyable to read, and just something that I like to just kind of kick back and go, oh, this is cool. I like this.
Love it. Cassidy, you want to do your Cassidy corner?
The thing I would like to splice about is actually a book I read recently, recommended to me by my friend in post, Jackie. Shout out, Jackie. The book is called You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy. And it's a book all about how to listen better. That's something I'm very interested in. The book kind of changed how I thought about the act of listening, because I am working my way out of this. I used to be one of those people who would always be nervous and think about what I'm going to say next in a conversation. And I realized, like, exactly what the book kind of said is that not listening is more so a sign of low self-esteem than arrogance. And it's been kind of rewiring my brain about that kind of thing, and talking about like how active listening is kind of like meditation. It's like an active practice. And I don't know, it's a really great book. I highly recommend it. And I've been trying to put into praxis the things that it posits. Yeah.
I think that's an underrated skill. That's some, you know, when you can do that, when you can really hear someone and be there for them in that moment and listen to them, like that's like, it's an outstanding exchange at that point. Like you're participating in a way that it's like, you're not overbearing. You're just hearing. And I just love that.
Sorry, I wasn't listening. No, I was. I agree with everything you've all said.
All right. On that note,
thank you for listening to this episode of Sips and Clips. You can catch us on Instagram at Sips and Clips Pod, or email us at sipsandclipspod@gmail.com. And remember, you keep on sipping while we keep on clipping. Bye.
bye-bye.
Sips and Clips is a podcast produced by Leanne McFalls and Michael Schusterman. Logo design by Mike Knoll. Production sound by Cassidy Legan. Post-production sound by Zach Griffin. Follow us on Instagram at sipsandclipspod, or email us at sipsandclipspod@gmail.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe.